Hello, beautiful soul. Welcome to my podcast or my YouTube channel. I'm your host and guide, Will Caminada, and I'm here to help you awaken, heal, and expand your consciousness. In this conversation episode, I had the pleasure to talk to Brandon Bozarth. Brandon is a spiritual teacher, channel, and transformational facilitator. He is called the Facilitator of Miracles for his unique ability to channel the shifts in perspective needed in order for his clients to free their minds and remember who they truly are. He channels a Sassani being called Shaka, who specializes in personal transformation and disseminating universal wisdom. And Brandon actually spontaneously channeled Shaka in this episode and shared some messages for humanity, such as where we are in the evolution process and what we can hope for in what we perceive our future. So many nuggets of wisdom and inspiration in this episode. I hope that you enjoy the show, and if you do, please hit the subscribe button, leave a comment or a review, and share this episode with your friends. Enjoy the show. Hi, Brandon. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Really excited to be here.
Yeah. I've been following you on Instagram. That's how we connected, and I love your work and your content. So I'm excited to talk to you about your spiritual awakening, your channeling, and ETs, and we'll see how this goes. To start, I would love for you to share a little bit about your spiritual awakening and your healing journey, how you got here today to be the spiritual coach that you are.
Yeah. I could take a whole podcast up, but I'll give you the Spark Notes version.
Yeah.
As a kid, I was always given, it was like, and I didn't realize it at the time, but in hindsight, I could see these breadcrumbs that just showed up in my reality. I had my older brother, he's 9 years older than me, give me a Deepak Chopra tape when I was 12. And it was on meditation, teaching you how to heal your own headache. And I just so happened to have a headache. And I did the meditation and the headache vanished. I met mentors growing up that, would coach me in basketball, but they were undercover non-duality teachers and spiritual teachers that were working on books and resources and awakening athletes. So I just had this like perpetual open mind because of my direct experience with things that were not considered normal. Eventually, I went network marketing, found me, and it was the first time that I felt, well, now I can inspire people. I can share this stuff because people in this industry are personally, they're motivated to grow as individuals. And I used it as an excuse to just do what I'm doing essentially now, only as that really young version of me. And eventually I got to a place where it just wasn't in alignment with me. I had well over 1,000 people go through my organization, and I was speaking in different parts of the world and the United States. And I got to a place where I just didn't have passion for it anymore. So I decided to walk away from the residual income. And I had no direction on what was next. It was just this knowing that if it's not 100% representative of my passion, there's going to be resistance. It's like the quote, you're always going to fail at being someone you're not. Mm-hmm. So even if I had residual income and a big team and all these things, I still felt like I was failing at just being my authentic self. And a lot of it was because I wasn't really educated on the deeper levels of healing and transformation and playing out the patterns. And I was doing steroids and I was sleeping around all the time to just quiet my mind. And I was 215 pounds. And so I reached a point where not one thing happened. It was like a series of all these little things. And I kind of sat down and looked back and I was like, is this me? Is this the direction that I want to head in? And it was just this loud no. And I knew it was like all of the spiritual principles that I've been reading and that have been shared with me were all in my mind, but they didn't travel to my heart. They didn't travel to action. And I realized if I think I know something and I'm not doing it, I don't actually know it. So it was like, wow, I actually don't know these to be absolutely true, or I would be doing them. So I said, I'm going to do them. I'm going to show myself that I can be supported by being myself, by acting on my joy. So I started doing that. And all that would come to me at the time was write in a journal, go on Facebook Live, share with people. And I had no concept or no insistence or expectation to get anything in return, because the last thing I considered myself was a coach. So I just started putting out content. And one day the content, I put out a newsletter, and mind you, at the time I have no income. My car's getting repossessed. I'm behind on my bills, and I'm just like, I would rather be doing this than do something that I hate or something that's just not me and pay all my bills. I didn't have this belief that, obviously I wasn't really open to the possibility of making a lot of money doing what I love, because it's not like I was creating any sort of offers or invitations for people to work with me, because I didn't even consider myself a professional. I just was sharing for the sake of it. And long story short, this woman received one of my emails moments before she was going to take her life. The email was entitled, "I'm excited to die." And she was sitting in a car about to take a handful of sleeping pills and go into the ocean. She was sitting in a parking lot on the beach, and her guides, she's a renowned medium in Australia, her guides said, "Turn on the radio before you take those pills." And she turned on the radio, and a song played, and it said, word for word, "You should stay a little bit longer."
Wow.
And she just broke down crying. "Oh my God, I got to stay." And then the next moment she got my email that said, "I'm excited to die." And it was a catchy way of me saying, yes, when we die, we leave behind the pain, the guilt, the worry, the doubt, but we don't have to die to experience what the other side can be like now. And she responded to me and said, "I want you to coach me." And I'm like, "Coach you for what?" I've coached basketball and football and sports and stuff. I'm sure this, 65-year-old woman on the other side of the world doesn't want that kind of coaching from me. So I just go, how about we just get on a call? I'll see if I can help. And because I had no concept of how a call should go, what I should say, what it should look like, I just spoke from my heart. Like whatever came was what was spoken. And she had a profound transformation on that call and healing, and so did I. And that moment kind of led to everything that I'm doing now, and the different retreats and programs and whatnot. But that was really the moment that catalyzed everything, because then from there, I saw how questioning her beliefs led her to a profound sense of peace. And the more I would do it, the more I would learn to do it to myself. Like every time I helped her drop this belief that was causing her suffering, I would drop it as well. So it was like this mutual opening. And then I really started to get the power of self-inquiry, of questioning our mind. And I've just really been learning and practicing that ever since.
Yeah. And that's so important. I think questioning, I always say that questioning is one of the first, if not the first sign that you're awakening spiritually. And thanks so much for sharing your story. I think a lot of people can relate to that sort of emptiness. And I think this is also one of the triggers and catalysts for a spiritual awakening, to feel a sense of, I may have everything I think I want on the outside, but inside there's something missing. And then the questioning comes. But what got my attention from your story is like the level of surrender. Because I think that's like the next step, because you can question, you can feel like there's something more, but it demands a lot of courage to like leave things behind, or even to take the next step. Like surrendering is, I guess, one of the hardest steps in the awakening.
Yeah. And, there's usually two paths that I see people experience when it comes to surrender. Number one, the pain of not surrendering is just unbearable. So they just finally stop resisting. They stop resisting reality, and they stop acting on their true desires and passions, because there's a snap. This is so painful. I can't bear it. So I would rather go, fail, even though we know that that's just a concept, than remain here. And then the other side is someone has a new understanding of surrender, and they understand that the only thing that's keeping me from surrendering is a fear of a made-up future that I believe I'm destined to experience if I did surrender. And that fear is just a projection of my mind. And I'm actually, the moment I resist experiencing that fear in the future, I experience it now. So I'm actually already experiencing the worst case scenario. Man, I really don't want to fail, so I'm going to avoid taking action on something. Well, that's what failure feels like, not being yourself. If you had to say experientially what it feels like, it's refusing to be yourself. So the moment we resist the future, we become it now, and then that creates the future inevitably that we don't want to experience. So when you understand, it's like, well, what am I holding on to? What do I think I'm gaining from resisting being myself? And if you really look at the question and you see what comes up, you'll see that everything you think you gain, safety, comfort, and whatnot, you're actually experiencing the opposite. You feel insecure. You feel very uncomfortable. And when you see that it doesn't serve you anymore, it might have served you before to get you here, it will drop you. You can't let something go. There's no doing and letting go, but it's realizing that something is no longer relevant. It doesn't make any sense to you. You can't find any reason that to hold on to it. In other words, when you can't find a reason to hold on to it, then your attention you won't pay attention to something you don't think is important, in other words. So right when I can't find a reason to hold on to that, it can't protect me, it can't keep me safe, it automatically drops because it is atrophied from your attention. And now that is placed on typically its opposite, which is what inspires you, what excites you, what you're left with in your natural state.
Yeah, and I guess that's a great way to open your channel to trust as well, because without trust, you can't keep going, right? I think surrender and trust are go hand in hand.
100%. And I give this definition of trust often, but it says that we're always trusting in something, even if we're trusting fully that we're not going to be supported. That's 100% belief in not being supported. So is it that we lack the trust, or we're trusting in lack? And when I trust in lack, then I'm going to create evidence for the lack, right? So and if I'm not aware of it, well, I can't change it. But if I'm aware of it and I still do it, it's because I actually think I need the lack. I think there's something unsafe about experiencing abundance. Something really bad will happen if I wasn't defining myself as lacking something. And of course, the paradox is everyone watching this right now, if you sat down and you asked the question, am I lacking something right now to just be here on this podcast? Is there something missing for me to just be here? And if you really sit with that question, another good question is, do I need anything to change right now to just be here doing what I'm doing? And if the answer is no, and it's always going to be no, then you realize lack and presence can't coexist.
Yeah. The power of now. I feel like there's someone who needed to hear this message today. I would love to talk a little bit about how you started channeling, because from your bio, it says that you channel a Sassani being called Shaka,
Mm-hmm.
who specializes in personal transformation and disseminating universal wisdom. How did you start channeling? Was it something that you intended it, that you wanted, or it just happened?
Yeah, kind of both, honestly. When I was 21, I was shown by a good friend Bashar's material, which Bashar has been channeling for about 35 years through Daryl Anka, an amazing channel. And I started tuning into his information at about 21, and it completely changed my life. It was like speaking directly to my soul. And I felt such a strong connection. I didn't really think, man, I'm going to be a channel one day. I just felt a profoundly strong connection to the material, and I put it into practice, and I proved to myself the validity of the material. And long story short, it led me to actually having a session, one-on-one session with Bashar in person. I've spoken to Bashar now in person through Daryl, I think 6 times, in dream time, like 6 or 7 times, and one time in just a one-on-one session in his house. And I was exploring our connection. I said, I feel such a strong connection to you. Do I channel you in a parallel life, or what's this connection about? He said, yes, you do channel us in a parallel life, but what you're feeling also is your counterpart in our society, because we really much identify as a unified whole. So our energy is going to feel very similar to their energy. And they're a fourth dimensional moving into fourth density, moving into fifth density society, which it overlaps perfectly with almost all of the Law of One raw material that talks about that. A society at the upper fourth density is all about unconditional love. They're unified as a fully telepathic society. And fifth density is where you go into non-physical, basically pure light form. They're right in the middle of that. So they're mostly light, but still semi-physical. They call it quasi-physical. And technically they're about 300 years in our future. So I'm talking to him and I go, okay, so this counterpart, what does he do? And he told me his specialty is something called cosmic circuitry. And he goes, cosmic circuitry is, and it was so funny to try to watch Bashar explain this in our language, because my sense of it was it's incredibly hard to explain some of these interdimensional, multidimensional concepts in a linear language, or in just any language, because even language is, not the natural language of spirit, right? So he's like trying to find the words, and he's like, it's basically, think of like this, like sacred geometric patterns that are made of vibration, just vibrational patterns that you can perceive as light and sound, but can also be played kind of like an instrument, and can then be imbued into individuals or groups to allow them to access more of themselves, more of their dormant DNA and memories. And this is a service that he gives to many people throughout the cosmos. And he explained that 3 years prior to that, I received one of those broadcasts, because he said that Shaka would broadcast them to other selves, to his past selves, and because they contain information, kind of like an activation type of experience, that if you're sensitive enough to receive it and match the frequency of it, then you can have a expanded awareness experience. And I didn't know that I had received one of these sacred circuits, but I did 3 years prior, and I wear it on my neck. And I was napping in the back of my parents' car on a family trip, and I jolted awake because this symbol just popped into my mind. And it was one of the first times, this is about maybe almost 4 years ago now, one of the first times I ever felt like I just received something. I didn't imagine it. I wasn't thinking about anything. I was on the verge of sleep, and boom, all of a sudden, clear as day in my mind, and I'm energized, and I go inside and I write, I draw it out. And after I draw it, I have my first experience of automatic writing, and just writing. And that was the first program that I actually put out, that outline. And I just thought I had a moment of a grace, or a moment of contact from my higher mind. But it actually turns out that 3 years prior to my session with Bashar, when he was telling me about cosmic circuitry, that's what I actually received 3 years prior, which became the foundation of really everything that I'm doing now. And so long story short, he said that Shaka is available for channeling if it's exciting for me. And I hired a channeling coach, and I brought up a lot of fears, and really deepened my surrender, because I have to be okay with not knowing anything that's going to happen, and being okay with what if it's wrong? What if it's this? What if it's that? So it was a 6-month period of learning how to adjust my brain state into gamma more rapidly, because that's what's called the channeling state. And then what happens is I just start getting the same thoughts at the same time that Shaka is having. That's actually, it's not, the old understanding is like something can come inside of your body and take you out, and that's not how it works.
Yeah.
You, like two tuning forks match a frequency, and you start having a telepathic experience that we have all the time with the people that we love. It rides on the energy of love. So when you're in love with someone, you say the same things at the same time, and you go, "Oh, what was that? That was a coincidence." No, that was a telepathic experience. And all I'm doing is I'm doing that with this extraterrestrial counterpart of mine. And a counterpart is just someone that shares the same oversoul, right, which I always describe as like the palm is the oversoul and the fingers are like the soul extensions. So essentially, if I'm speaking from a linear point of view, he's my future self.
Mm-hmm. And both Bashar and Shaka are Sassani being, right?
Yes, they're part. Yeah.
And what is a Sassani? Sassani or Sassani? How do you say
Sassani.
it? Sassani. So what is a Sassani being? Just to put things into context.
Yeah. So their full name is S. Sassani, but their transition now into fifth density, their name has changed to Shakani, because they had an experience called the Shakana, which was essentially a collective evolutionary kind of experience that happened over 3 days, where they all joined in meditation. I think actually that's their fourth density name, and their ancient name is Sassani.
Mm-hmm.
So they are, in a sense, a mix between gray alien, gray extraterrestrials that, Dolores Cannon. I mean, there's tons of information on the grays. The grays are essentially a parallel version of humans, from a different version of Earth that destroyed themselves, that tunneled into our reality, asking for help from higher dimensional beings like Arcturus and what are they called? The mantis beings, which are like apparently DNA experts. And hey, we're destroying our planet. We're going to kill ourselves off. We can't reproduce. They had to burrow underground because they destroyed their atmosphere. That's why their skin went gray, and they were going to die off. And then they put this call for help out. The call was received, and they realized the only way to rebalance themselves is through organic DNA, to come back to nature in a sense. So they basically represent our polarity. They went down the path that is a potential with us of, domination, the kind of like the overly masculine, underly expressed feminine, just like Atlantis,
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of repeating the same things, but the difference is we have the Sassani, we have these other channels that they didn't have, that are disseminating the wisdom and information that can allow us to align with a more positive path. And essentially that's because of the grays. So we really have the grays to thank. And the Sassani are the third hybridized race, basically between humans and gray. So you have gray, and then you have the first, introducing of human DNA, which according to them, we've agreed, a certain amount of us, I think it's about 100 million, have decided to say, you know what, we want to help this race not die out. We agree to donate our DNA, and we don't want to remember it, because something like that, as a very young species, it would be traumatic, and it would take away from our normal life. It's like, man, why have a career if I'm just thinking about that one time that some of my DNA got extracted? So it's like we had to find a way to compartmentalize it until we're ready to unearth it. And this is what Dolores Cannon did in the, pretty sure like the 80s or 90s, with all of this regression work to bring these memories back to the surface. Psychiatrists have studied it and have proven that they're not dreams or imagination, that it's actually registered for some people as trauma, which means it has to be considered real by them, and dreams can't do that. So there's been a lot of evidence that there's been these abductions going on, but not for nefarious reasons, for the overall evolution of our planet and to help the species survive. But as a result of that, the third race that was created represents a perfect blend between humans and gray. You could say a 50-50 balance between masculine, feminine, logic, and emotion. They kind of represent that balance point. And that's the Sassani people.
Right. And you mentioned that
we're their ancestors, in other words. They actually call us, they call the earth and all of us on it, the great mothers.
Yeah. Yeah. I see some similarity, a lot of similarities, because I read a lot about the Pleiadians, and I channel them as well. And they say that we are their ancestors as well, and that our evolution is their evolution as well.
Yeah.
And so it's not like they're going to come here and save us, even though they are, in a way, like you said, on a linear perspective, they are the next step in our evolution, but it's a two-way road. And you mentioned that they are in fourth to fifth density, right?
Yeah.
And just to give a context to the viewers or listeners, the fourth density is the equivalent to 5D consciousness. Some people know as fifth dimension, but we would be between third and fourth density. Is that right? And that's according to the law of one.
The law of one and Bashar, they both agree on that. And we're basically transitioning into fourth, or according to Bashar and others, we did make that transition on 2012, but it is a transition. So it's in the process of crystallizing, and there's still a choice of what track do I want to be on? Do I want to repeat third density, or do I want to evolve into fourth density? And basically the same, well, not the same thing, but Bashar's society, this Sassani, in order for them to move into fifth density, for them to serve us and support us in our own evolution, actually evolves them into fifth density. Mm-hmm. And their mentors are Sirius, which they're on the edge of sixth going into seventh density. So there's this ladder of evolution of, collectives helping collectives as just a natural phenomenon.
The same way that, your evolution as an individual is contributing to the evolution of the collective.
Yeah, exactly. And even how maybe a first world society could come in and support a second world. And maybe then that second world can support a third world country. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I would love to know if there are any recurring messages, or like the most common messages that you get from Shaka that you could share with us.
Well, I could also get into the channeling state if you want to do that, and you can just ask.
Yeah.
You want to do that?
That would be good.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, we might as well.
I don't know what questions I'll ask, but I'll just channel some questions.
Yeah, if you need help with the questions, you just ask the P's, and then
yes,
there's two channels talking. So it'll take me a couple minutes, and then we'll just see what happens. All right, and we extend our greatest love, joy, and appreciation for the co-creation, and we ask you, where would you like to begin?
Hi, Shaka. It's a pleasure to communicate with you.
To you as well.
Thank you. I would like to begin by asking you um, about the evolution of consciousness for this planet, for planet Earth. Brandon and I were talking about the shift from third density into fourth density level of consciousness. And I'd love to know from you how we are doing in that shift, in that evolution. Where are we right
Well,
now?
all right. Thank you for the inquiry. The idea is that you are able to have such interactions such as this because you are headed in a direction of Earth that represents the idea of more open contact, thus implying the idea of a more integrated, holistic, unified society. So, in general, this is where you are headed. However, you are still in a bit of a limbo state between different parallel realities that you have the option to crystallize and experience. And this is what has been referred to as the eye of the needle on your planet, because you are deciding which tunnel you would like to focus in. And the idea is there are several different tunnels leading to several different destinations. And as you explore each tunnel, further and further, you will have more of a tunnel vision within that particular tunnel, making it that much more difficult to transfer over or shift over to other tunnels. So again, this is nothing to worry about. It's simply a recognition of a natural, you could say, splitting of your collective into a more positive, negative, and infinite different paths in between. These are simply all different pathways that you can take. So it is of the utmost importance at this timing that you are conscious and intentional with what type of tunnel you wish to experience.
Excellent. So the tunnel analogy would be an analogy for timelines.
In a sense, yes.
Are we in a similar timeline of the age of Atlantis?
Archetypally, yes. The idea, however, is you are experimenting, and archetypally, the Americas specifically are the archetypal expression of Atlantis as they are in your collective global society, what are considered to be the free or most free nations. Whether that is your experience of them or not isn't relevant to the idea that that is what they are attempting to express. So you have a choice now to experience a repeating of the idea of Atlantis, or to transform and transcend what has been called the fall of Atlantis by balancing yourselves out individually and creating a more unified, integrated society. So yes, you are playing out old themes that date back to Atlantis, but actually date back much further to societies that many of you are not even aware of.
I want to ask a question regarding power and the
All right.
perhaps misuse or abuse of power. Was that the reason that Atlantis was vanished?
It would be a bit more accurate to say a misunderstanding of power, because from the misunderstanding, the idea of a misuse of power is possible, because power in its fundamental state cannot be misused. Power in its fundamental state is the recognition that you are an aspect of all that is. And at your core, you are infinite. And at your core, you are absolutely supported by creation. And so for an individual or a society to understand that they are supported being themselves, meaning they don't need to hurt or harm themselves or any other individuals or nature in order to be supported and have what they need, they simply can't misuse that understanding, because that understanding is the natural state. And the natural state is perfectly harmonic with nature, with each other. It is conducive, it is connective, it is integrative by its nature. So true power cannot be misused.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of powerlessness, in a sense, convincing you that you need to gain power, is how a false sense of power can be misused. And this is what we sense you are referring to.
Yes.
So it's more of the idea of powerlessness is being expressed versus a misuse of power.
Right. And this true nature of the inner power that resides within each and every one of us.
Yes.
How can we reclaim that inner power in what we perceive as our current times?
By not defining it as something that needs to be reclaimed. By understanding that it is what you are at your core. The only thing that can create the idea of being disconnected or disassociated from it are your beliefs about it. But fundamentally, even giving up your power is a powerful thing to do because it is your creation. You are using the same power that you may use to create a sense of empowerment to create a sense of disempowerment. So you can never lose your power. You can only become aware of how you are using your power to create. And many of you are using your power to create to experience disempowerment. So until you realize that that's not necessary, until you realize that that is based in fear-based negative beliefs and let them go, you will continue to do so.
Right. I personally believe that at the moment, there is a portion of humanity that is activating that inner power, that true nature, and awakening to the reality that there's more than one reality. But I'd like to know your perspective on what is the percentage of humanity that is awakening, and how long in our linear time can we expect the majority of people to be in that awakened state?
All right. Well, the answer depends on your definition of awakened. Because from our perspective, there are certain vibrational frequencies that can be measured that describe the idea of an individual who is more positively oriented than negative. So if you wish this to be your measure of awakened, or if you have a different measure, we can give you a more accurate reading.
Yes, I believe that positively polarized is a good idea.
All right, one moment. Just over 30% of your society is slightly more positive than negative.
All right. And is there some kind
Let's
of...
just say under 30% is when your society can go down a more negative path.
And is there a time span or...
And one moment. We are giving you a reading of energy, not necessarily of individual people. So from our perspective, the collective energy dynamics that are at play is approximately 30 to 35% positive. Interestingly enough, that actually outweighs the 70%.
Right.
Even though statistically it seems to be the opposite, because the nature of positivity is expansive, there is actually a turning of the tide that you are experiencing now.
All right. And just one last question before I let you go back. For us, we see things in a more linear fashion. So sometimes I feel like a lot of people are discouraged because there seems to be a lot of darkness is still, or chaos, and people may not see the evolution. But I also personally feel like if we just look at the linear time, it may be a little bit frustrating for us because we might have that feeling that things are not evolving as fast as we wish.
All right.
But from your perspective, from a more nonlinear perspective, can you estimate some Earth years or centuries for a bigger shift in the evolution to the fourth density?
All right. First off, the idea is that for those of you that are interpreting your reality as not being positive evolutionary steps, we would invite you to redefine your definition of evolution, because you are evolving by experiencing more negativity than you ever could previously, because you are now ready to integrate and transform that level of darkness, because you are now ready to experience that level of light. So the act of revealing and experiencing and viewing in your reality out there, the idea of negativity, is actually a positive act, because you are expanding your awareness of all that is. And within the definition of all that is negativity. It's a part of existence. So as you become more aware of yourself, you will become more aware of all sides and expressions of the polarities. So you can simply choose which one you prefer. But you cannot clearly choose what you prefer if you don't have an example of what you don't prefer. So you are actually experiencing something that's going to be leading you towards a rapid evolution into what you call a more positive and peaceful society in a way that your civilization has never seen before. As far as a timeline, in our estimation, by 2050, all war on your planet will cease. By 2100, virtually all forms of starvation and disease, chronically speaking, will also cease. And you will be a unified society as well as an interplanetary society.
Amazing.
But the beginning of that society will be starting around your years of 2050.
Mm-hmm. And that would be sort of going back to what it used to be before?
More. One moment.
In terms of connecting with the higher realms?
In those terms, yes. But you are going to experience something that, as far as we are aware, is unlike anything else in creation. Mm-hmm. So unique and so powerful because of the degree of transformation on this planet of Earth is so incredibly rare throughout the cosmos that your ability to snap back into the light far surpasses many societies' ability, just because of the experience of contrast alone and the masterhood that is developed by learning how to transform such darkness is something that many societies can learn from. And so your potential to transform and transcend and support many other societies throughout your cosmos is very high, and is what will be expressed as Earth becoming the 6th hybrid race, which eventually will all combine into the 7th hybrid race and will bring a balance and a transformation to aspects of the universe that creation has never seen before.
Was this the original plan for Earth?
You could say that. It really was all set into motion, if we have to pick an Earth event, when the Anunnaki arrived. It is, in a sense, the karmic completion of that event.
Excellent. I thank you for your answers and for sharing your wisdom with us.
You are welcome. We thank you for the co-creation. We thank you for the allowance of our insight and passion to be shared with you in this time in this way. We bid you a good day and happy dreams.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Brandon. That was awesome.
You're welcome.
How do you feel?
Really relaxed. Yeah, I feel like little hazy, but
Do you remember what you channel, or sometimes you don't?
if I need to know, I'll remember it. But for the most part, it's a blur. Unless you pick something out, then it kind of comes back to me. But I remember the reading of Earth's energy. I remember that, and the rest is kind of a blur. But if you were to pick some things out, it would probably come back.
Well, that was amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you for your willingness to do this. I loved it. And I think there's like so many, uh, I think that hope is the words that I that's coming to me, it's also like projecting in ourselves a timeline that we desire.
Yeah.
Right. Because if we're operating in, I mean, fear is present, but I think it's the awareness of the fear that is the key. It's like if you're fearful, you can shift that. And if you're worrying about anything, you can just remember that worrying is you jumping into a timeline that you don't want.
Yeah, timeline of more worry.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like hearing Shaka saying that, in the future is a more positive, there is a positive outcome. I think that if we all, imagine that more positive timeline, it's definitely going to happen. And if it's going to happen next year or the next decade, I think it's still up to us. What do you think?
Totally. Yep. I mean, that's what all of the extraterrestrials say. It's like, we can only meet you halfway. We can't be your saviors. We will refuse to, because it will do you more harm than good, and we do not wish to do you harm. That would be just totally against their own evolutionary path. So they're really waiting for us. And a big part of it, I call it the two sides of the coin, and that's what I teach, whether it's with Shaka or the programs that we do. Is one side of the coin is the healing, is the transformational work, is self-inquiry, and the other side is acting and expressing our passion in the world. You can't, you can't really have one without the other, because if you notice a child, when they wake up, and young children, they just start creating. It's effortless. They start painting, drawing, whatever. And they do it. Why? Because it's who and what they are. Not because they need to, not because they should, not because they learned it anywhere, because they go, well, I'm just excited about this, so I'm going to do it. They don't wonder, what are the other children going to think? Am I going to get paid from this? So the natural state is, well, I'm here, I'm present. And from that, inspiration happens. It's not something you do. It's just something that arises, and you either resist it or not. If you resist it, then you're being called into inquiry, to inquire, what am I believing about myself that would stop me from being myself? And so that formula, I call it, the formula that has come to me is, know yourself, be yourself, create paradise. And I think that's what we're all learning.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you mentioned like the children naturally create, and I also think that emotionally speaking, they're more open, they're more in touch with their emotions. If they're sad, they're just crying, and then 2 seconds after they're laughing, right?
They drop it. Yeah.
So there's a lot to learn from them. Just to finish our interview, I usually have some final questions that I call them fun and deep. So whatever comes to your mind, you can answer. So the first question is, what is your definition of healing?
I would say realizing yourself. At its core, it's seeing who you are. And it requires seeing through what you believe you're not.
Love that. Next question is, imagine you could have a superhero kind of power. What would it be?
It's a good one. A superhero power. Man, I just want to be Gandalf at the end of the day. If that's considered a power, everything Gandalf can do, just like, full-blown wizard, is definitely like super fun. But then what came to mind was like shape-shifting into like animals and stuff would be really cool. Like just be a bird and like, and I really think all that is possible. And that's what comes to mind.
Great. Imagine that all the books in the world were going to be destroyed and deleted forever. If you had to save only one book, which book would you save and why?
Oh. I mean, you probably get so much resistance on this question. Yeah. I mean, like, it's so hard to choose just
it is,
one.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. One book. God. Probably A Course in Miracles. Just because it's for the rest of my life. If I'm going to have one book, that's a book that I can learn. Like I might need the rest of my life to really understand that
every year.
So probably that.
Great. What is the one thing that people would be surprised to know about you?
Probably that I used to be a bodybuilder. Like I did a competition, natural bodybuilding show, even though I wasn't natural at the time. And that was a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, I think that's not something people would expect from a spiritual teacher.
Yeah, exactly.
Love that. Let's suppose that we sign some kind of contract before coming to this life, and then we choose what we came here to learn as well as to teach. What do you think this would be for you in this lifetime?
I'd say learning. The word that has been just echoed throughout my experience has been integration. So learning how to integrate, which my definition of that is to transform the separate self or ego. And the teaching is, I think for me, it's my action of being myself in the world, which means at this point, it's incredibly hard for me to not do the things that come to me that are inspiring and that I'm passionate about. And so I think that's the teaching, is you can be supported.
Yeah, and I believe you're doing this.
Yeah, right. You can be supported in your passion, no matter what it looks like.
And the last question is called 3 Truths. If you, it's a hypothetical. So let's suppose in many years to come, you're going to transition from this human experience into the spiritual experience. And you have a piece of paper that you can write 3 truths. Everything else that you've done, all the videos, all the books, all the posts, is going to be deleted. You only have that paper and you can write 3 truths. And that's kind of like your legacy for your kids or your family or humanity. Which would be your 3 truths? And I know it's hard, but
it's a great question. The first one would be that you are and everything is consciousness. That there's only one underlying thing.
Yes. Amen.
So number 1. Number 2 would be any suffering or fear that you have is based in a lie that you're not aware of. The third would probably be forgiveness is you can forgive yourself you can forgive your way to perfect inner peace. And nothing through the world can give you that. Nothing in the physical world can give you the happiness or peace, but forgiveness can. And all we're doing is we're forgive the stories that create the separate self.
Yeah, forgiving our consciousness as well.
Yeah.
Love that. Thank you. Let us know, please, how people can connect with you. What's the best way, and if there's anything in the pipeline that you want to share.
Yeah. So you can go to my website, brandonbozarth.com. I'm most active on Instagram. It's just brandon.bozarth. And we have well, I don't know when this is going to come out, so the event might change, but I do have a show with Shaka every Tuesday. Every other Tuesday, I do a live channeling with Q&A. So you could find that on consciousvitality.com, or you can go to the link in my bio on my Instagram and attend the show. It's $9.99 a month for a membership. And if you can't afford it, you can just request to be sponsored, and no one will get turned down. So we really want to make that accessible. And yeah.
That's awesome. And I'll make sure to put the links in the description notes so that people can find you. And Brandon, I want to acknowledge you for your courage and commitment to this work, and for your authenticity in everything you do, and willingness to channel spontaneously. And just want to say thank you for being here, and thank you for shining your light.
I appreciate that, Will. This has been such a fun and spontaneous interview and just conversation, and I really enjoyed it, and hope we can do it again.
Sure. Thank you so much. Much love.
Likewise.
Thanks for watching or listening to this episode. If you'd like to learn more about Brandon's work, visit his website www.brandonbozarth.com and follow him on Instagram at brandon.bozarth. As usual, you can find links on the show's notes. And once again, if this has brought you value, please subscribe to my podcast and take a screenshot of it, share it to your Instagram story, and be sure to tag me and Brandon so that we know it's brought you value and your friends may benefit from this too. As always, keep shining your light, keep your heart open, and let love lead the way. I love you. See you in the next episode.